We begged. We negotiated. We offered peace. But the Urzek's swarm, it doesn't understand peace. It doesn't want coexistence. It feeds on weakness, and we gave it an all-you-can-eat buffet of compliance. Our diplomacy didn't slow it down. It made it stronger. Every treaty, every bargain, was another weapon in its arsenal. So, when our empires began to burn, we had only one option left, an option we buried centuries ago. We turned to the species that doesn't just survive war. They become it. We turned to the monsters. We turned to the humans. And we woke a nightmare. Tavares, High Chancellor of the League of Harmonious Species, leaned forward, her bioluminescent tendrils dimming with unease. The council chamber, usually a beacon of diplomacy and restraint, felt like a tomb. Every species present, the Seraphim of Kithrax, the Xynox Collective, even the coldly logical Varnix, sat in unnerving silence. We've exhausted every possibility, intoned Prime Mediator Kellis, his voice barely masking his fear. The swarm has consumed 12 sectors. They are learning from us. Negotiation is now an accelerant to their destruction. Tavares' translucent skin pulsed as she struggled to maintain composure. And you believe that is the solution? Her gaze fell on the encrypted file displayed on the holo projector. The symbol on the cover was a simple insignia, Earth's ancient flag, a forgotten relic of a barbaric past. Beneath it, a name. Project Ghost Storm. We banned them for a reason, she hissed, her voice barely above a whisper. Humanity isn't a weapon. They're a catastrophe. We don't have a choice. Kellis murmured, his usually calculated demeanor fraying. The swarm doesn't negotiate. They adapt. Our pacifism feeds them. We need chaos. We need a monster, Tavares finished, her words like lead. Maddox Kane. A silence fell, heavier than a collapsed star. Every species in the chamber remembered the name. The butcher of Bel-Arwaix. The architect of extinction. The man who didn't wage wars. He ended them. Tavares' tendrils flickered dimly, her mind recalling the footage classified even from the Council's highest echelons. Kane hadn't just defeated enemies, he had erased them. Entire civilizations reduced to memories because they had dared to threaten Earth. His strategies were unnatural, unpredictable, terrifying. He won't help us. She wasn't trying to convince them. She was trying to convince herself. Earth is next. The words echoed through the chamber like a death sentence. Tavares' heart pulsed. The swarm had set its sights on Earth. Humanity, the species the galaxy had banished after the silent sundering, would fall. And when Earth fell, the galaxy would follow. Her gaze lingered on the file. You understand the consequences of this decision? Kellis didn't blink. If we wake him up, we can't control him. No, Tavares whispered. We can't. But they had no choice. Veldar 9. A desolate rock on the fringes of known space. The League had exiled Kane here after the Bel-Arwaix campaign. No surveillance. No comms. Just Kane and his ghosts. The dropship touched down in silence, the weight of its mission suffocating the air. Kellis stepped out first, flanked by 2 heavily armed enforcers. Their weapons, though ceremonial, felt comically useless. The atmosphere reeked of iron and ash. The wind whispered with the echoes of forgotten wars. They found him by the wreckage of an ancient star cruiser, its hull rusted, its purpose long forgotten. Maddox Kane stood at the edge of a precipice, staring into the abyss below like it might whisper something back. Kane! No response. Commander Maddox Kane. Kane didn't move. Earth is next. Kane turned, his expression as cold as a dead star. His eyes, once bright with purpose, were now hollow. Haunted. His face was etched with the scars of wars no one dared speak of. Took you long enough. His voice was a low growl, laced with bitterness. I was wondering how many billions had to die before you crawled back. Kellis swallowed hard. The swarm. I know. Kane's gaze didn't waver. I've been watching. Tavares stepped forward, her composure fraying at the edges. Kane! His gaze snapped to her. Ah! The diplomat! His tone was dripping with venom. Here to lecture me on morality again? We're not here to ask. Tavares' voice was firm, but her pulse betrayed her fear. We're here because if you don't stop them, everything burns. And what makes you think I care? The words cut like a blade. Earth. Kellis's voice was barely above a whisper. They're next. For a moment, Kane was silent. His jaw clenched. His eyes darkened. You let this happen, he muttered, voice laced with restrained fury. You disarmed the galaxy. You erased everything that could have stopped this. And now, you're begging me to clean up your mess? If Earth falls, Kellis's voice cracked. You know what comes next. A long silence followed. Kane's gaze drifted to the horizon, where the rusted remains of forgotten battles lay like scars on the landscape. What do I get? Tavares blinked. What? What do I get? Kane repeated, his voice colder than the void. When I save your galaxy? Whatever you want. A cruel smile tugged at the corner of his lips. You can't give me what I want. Try us. Kane's eyes locked onto hers. I want to watch this galaxy burn. Silence. And when I'm done, Kane stepped forward, towering over them. I walk away. No more chains. No more exile. Tavares hesitated. Agreed. Kane's smile was devoid of warmth. Then I'll give you what you want. He turned toward the wreckage, his movements deliberate, calculated. But you won't like what it costs. 4 weeks later. The galaxy trembled. Reports of Ghost Storm protocol echoed across the cosmos. Kane's forces didn't fight wars. They erased civilizations. His tactics were unpredictable, his strategies brutal, his ruthlessness beyond comprehension. He's not fighting to win. Tavares' voice was a whisper as she watched the holofeed. He's fighting to break them. Kane stood on the bridge of the Vanguard's wrath, his eyes fixed on the swarm's armada. His army of outcasts, assassins, and broken souls stood ready. Prepare Project Widowmaker. The AI chimed obediently. Target locked. Kane, Kellis's voice echoed through the comms. Are you sure about this? No. Kane's smile was grim. But it doesn't matter. A heartbeat of silence. Let's show them what happens when you piss off the wrong species. And with a single word, Maddox Kane unleashed hell. Fire. You don't need soldiers. Maddox Kane's voice echoed through the abandoned corridors of the Black Crucible. You need predators. The recruits stood before him, a ragtag band of exiled species, rogue AI constructs, and beings the galaxy had long deemed too dangerous, too unstable to exist in civilized society. Kane paced slowly, his boots echoing with the weight of unspoken violence. His eyes swept over them, calculating, dissecting. I'm not here to train you, he growled. Training makes soldiers. Soldiers follow rules. And rules? His lips curled into a grim smile. Rules get you killed. A hulking Drek warlord shifted uncomfortably, his 6 eyes narrowing. Kane stopped in front of him, tilting his head. Something on your mind, big guy? We don't fight like humans. The Drek rumbled, voice like grinding stone. We don't think like you. Kane chuckled, a low, predatory sound. That's the problem. He leaned in, voice dropping to a whisper that somehow filled the space. You've been taught to fight with honor. Discipline. Strategy. He straightened, his gaze sweeping the room again. Forget all that. We're not here to fight. We're here to win. He turned to a hollow projector, activating a simulation that painted the walls with hellish imagery, fleets burning, cities crumbling, entire worlds consumed by the Urzex swarm. This? Kane's voice hardened. This is what happens when you play by the rules. He pointed at the writhing swarm on the projection. They don't care about honor. They don't respect treaties. They adapt. They consume. His gaze locked onto the recruits. But they've never faced something they can't adapt to. A pause. They've never faced chaos. Kane stepped into the center of the room, his presence commanding absolute attention. I'm not asking you to fight like me. His voice was quiet now, but every syllable carried weight. I'm asking you to think like me. The projection shifted, displaying Earth's forgotten weapons, Project Widowmaker, Hellfire Protocol, neural decay strikes. Weapons so brutal they had been buried under galactic law, deemed too monstrous to exist. Kane's eyes gleamed. We don't beat the swarm by being stronger. His gaze hardened. We beat them by making them afraid. Silence filled the air like a noose tightening around the recruits' throats. Fear is a weapon, Kane murmured. And I'm going to teach you how to wield it. Again. The simulation restarted. The recruits screamed as virtual swarm drones ripped through their formations. Kane watched from the sidelines, arms crossed, expression unreadable. You lasted 20 seconds that time. His voice was cold. That's an improvement. A battered Kirin sniper staggered to his feet, his breathing ragged. We can't beat them head on. No shit. Kane's tone was flat. So stop trying. The Drek warlord growled. Then what's the plan, Ghost Storm? Kane's smile was razor sharp. We stop thinking like prey. He stepped into the center, shutting down the simulation with a flick of his wrist. The swarm calculates outcomes. Predicts every possible move. He paced, circling them like a predator among wounded prey. But you know what they can't predict? His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. A lunatic. A murmur rippled through the crowd. We don't attack their fleets. Kane's voice gained momentum, intensity. We attack their minds. We make them doubt. We make them feel. A flick of his fingers activated another projection, a galaxy-wide map with highlighted weak points pulsating like exposed nerves. We hit them where it hurts. His finger traced along the map. Disrupt communication relays. Seed misinformation into their hive consciousness. Make them question reality. He looked up, his eyes burning with cold fire. And when they're drowning in confusion, Kane's smile was pure predation. We cut their throats. Lesson 1. Kane stood before them, a plasma blade humming ominously in his grip. War isn't won on the battlefield. He tossed the blade aside, letting it clang to the ground. It's won here. He tapped his temple. A holographic swarm appeared, simulated drones flooding toward them. You don't fight the enemy. Kane's voice was a whisper, but it sliced through the tension. You make them fight themselves. The hologram shifted, drones turning on each other, confusion spreading like a virus. You create doubt. The image flickered, showing the swarm collapsing into chaos. And when they're weak, you break them. Lesson 2. Kane stood in the training field, a barren wasteland lit by artificial suns. The recruits stood before him, their eyes hardened by brutal simulations. Pain is temporary. Kane's gaze swept over them. But fear? Fear lasts forever. He activated a neural simulation, feeding the recruits the terror the swarm induced in its victims, memories of planets consumed, families torn apart, minds fractured. The agony echoed through their neural pathways. Feel that? Kane's voice was cold, relentless. That's what the swarm does to its enemies. He let the terror linger for a moment longer before severing the connection. Now imagine. His voice was barely above a whisper. If we did that to them. Eyes widened. Realization dawned. We don't need to kill them. Kane's smile was devoid of warmth. We need to make them afraid to even think about us. Lesson 3. The recruits stood on the firing range, facing holographic representations of swarm drones. Survival isn't about being stronger. Kane's voice echoed through the field. It's about being unpredictable. A simulation triggered, the swarm adapting, anticipating their moves. They learn. They evolve. Kane's voice was harsh, cutting through the chaos. So we stay one step ahead. He moved through the chaos like a ghost, striking where the swarm least expected, shifting tactics before the hive could adapt. Be the variable they can't predict. The simulation ended. The recruits stood in silence, sweat dripping, hearts pounding. Congratulations. Kane's voice was ice. You've just survived 20 seconds longer than anyone else. A beat of silence. Let's make it 30. Final lesson. Kane stood before them, the weight of the galaxy on his shoulders. Mercy is a weakness. His voice was devoid of compassion. You don't leave survivors. You don't give them a chance to recover. His eyes burned with the ghosts of 1,000 wars. You make them remember. A long pause. Because fear. His voice was barely above a whisper now. Fear is forever. The recruits stood taller. Their eyes, once filled with uncertainty, now burned with a newfound purpose. Tomorrow. Kane's gaze swept over them one last time. We stop being prey. He turned, walking toward the control console. Tomorrow. Kane's voice echoed like a death knell. We become the nightmare. We don't hit them where they're strong. Maddox Kane's voice cut through the tense silence of the war room, his eyes locked on the holographic display of the Urzex swarm's fleet, a seething mass of death that stretched across the void. We hit them where they think they're strong. The recruits stood around him, hardened now, battle-ready. Weeks of relentless training had stripped away their fear, replacing it with a cold, calculated brutality. Kane didn't train soldiers. He forged predators. And now, those predators were ready to be unleashed. They controlled the grid. Kane pointed at the pulsating neural relay, the swarm's communication nexus. They see everything. Anticipate every move. His jaw clenched, eyes narrowing. But there's one thing they never accounted for. A beat of silence. Us. Kane's smile was grim. We don't attack their fleet. We don't storm their worlds. His finger traced along the map, stopping on a barely noticeable cluster of outposts. We shut down their mind. A ripple of unease passed through the room. The swarm wasn't just an enemy. It was a collective consciousness. Disrupting their neural web wouldn't just cripple them. It would break them. You want to kill a hive? Kane's eyes gleamed with dangerous intent. Make it tear itself apart. Talon, a rogue Varnix assassin, spoke up, his voice laced with skepticism. You're talking about destabilizing the core nodes. Even if we get close, their adaptation rate doesn't matter. Kane cut him off, his tone sharp. They adapt to patterns. Logic. Predictable tactics. A cruel smile tugged at the corner of his lips. But there's nothing predictable about madness. Kane tapped the console, bringing up Project Widowmaker. The recruits stiffened. The file had been whispered about in fear, locked away in Earth's darkest vaults. This isn't a virus. Kane's voice was cold, clinical. This is a mimetic nightmare. A flick of his fingers zoomed in on the neural relay. We're not destroying their network. His gaze hardened. We're corrupting it. Silence. We make them question reality. Doubt their own existence. His eyes gleamed with a predator's edge. When a hive mind starts questioning itself. His voice dropped, barely above a whisper. It self-destructs. Talon's expression darkened. How do we deploy it? Kane's smile was all teeth. We go in. A murmur rippled through the recruits. You mean? Kyra, a Kirin sniper, blinked. A ground assault? Not an assault. Kane's tone was deadly serious. A surgical strike. He keyed in coordinates. We're hitting their core node. The nexus of Clythar. That's suicide, Talon muttered. Kane's gaze snapped to him. So's doing nothing. A heavy silence fell. They won't expect us to hit the nexus directly. Kane's eyes were ice. Because no one's ever been stupid enough to try. A beat. Except us. A grim chuckle echoed from one of the recruits. Kane's smile mirrored it. We go in quiet. Kane's voice was steel. We plant Widowmaker in the core. And when the virus hits... His gaze swept over them, cold and merciless. The swarm eats itself alive. Final checks. Kane's voice echoed through the drop bay as his team prepped for insertion. We get one shot at this. Kyra double-checked her sniper module, her hands steady despite the tension in the air. Scopes calibrated. Talon secured his plasma daggers, eyes cold. Stealth modules active. Comms? Kane's tone was clipped. Encrypted. Zorak, the cybernetically enhanced Seraphim, confirmed. Ghost frequency. No trace. Kane nodded, his expression unreadable. Remember the plan. His voice dropped, cold and unwavering. We move fast. Silent. No heroics. His gaze hardened. Get in. Corrupt the core. Get out. A beat. If you can't get out. His eyes met each of theirs, unflinching. Make sure they don't either. No one spoke. They understood. 10 seconds to drop. The AI chimed. Kane exhaled slowly, his mind already 10 steps ahead. Go Storm, engage. The drop was smooth. Silent. They landed a kilometer from the Nexus, the terrain a twisted landscape of biomechanical growths pulsating with unnatural life. Eyes up, Kane murmured, his voice barely audible through the comms. We're in. The team moved like shadows, slipping between patrols, bypassing security grids with precision that spoke of brutal training. Contact, Kyra whispered, sighting down her scope. 2 drones. 60 meters. Take them. Kane's order was immediate. A whisper of plasma, and the drones crumpled. Clear. They advanced, the Nexus looming ahead, a monolithic structure of pulsating neuroconduits, its core throbbing like a malignant heart. Talon. On me. Kane and Talon approached the interface node, Zorak already hacking into its system. Widowmaker prepped. Zorak muttered, his fingers a blur of precision. We're ready. Kane's jaw clenched. Do it. The moment the virus uploaded, a pulse rippled through the Nexus. We're in. Zorak's voice was tight. Widowmaker's spreading. A tremor echoed through the hive network. The swarm's collective mind shuddered. Something's wrong, Kyra hissed. They're adapting, Talon snapped. Kane's eyes narrowed. No. His blood ran cold. They're learning. The Nexus pulsed violently. The swarm wasn't collapsing. It was integrating Widowmaker. Kane! Zorak's voice was urgent. It's mutating. We've. Abort. Kane's voice was ice. Shut it down. Too late. The Nexus pulsed again. They've reversed the code. Kane's jaw clenched. We just taught them how to think like us. Extraction now. Kane barked. Fall back. But the swarm was already there. Incoming! Kyra's shout echoed as drones descended like a storm, plasma fire streaking through the air. Kane's mind moved faster than his body. Cover fire! Get to the exfil point! Talon's daggers flashed, cutting through drones, while Kyra's sniper shots echoed like death knells. Zorak, shut it down! Kane's voice was raw, desperate. Trying! Zorak's fingers flew over the controls. Kane! Kyra's voice was sharp. We're surrounded! Kane's heart pounded as he made the only call left. Detonate the core. A stunned silence. We don't get out. Kane's voice was steel. Neither do they. Confirmed. Zorak whispered. A beat. Core detonation in 5, 4. Kane's eyes burned with cold resolve. We make them remember, he whispered. 3, 2. We end this. 1. Hell erupted. Status? Maddox Kane's voice was a razor-edged whisper over the comms, his mind already calculating the next 5 moves. Core detonation was incomplete. Zorak's voice came through, laced with tension. Nexus integrity is fractured but not destroyed. Damage assessment? Kane's jaw clenched. 78% compromised. Not good enough. Kane growled, eyes narrowing as the neuropulse from the Nexus rippled across the battlefield. If the core's still breathing, they're still learning. They're adapting faster than expected. Zorak's tone was grim. Widowmaker destabilized their hive, but they're stabilizing. Kane finished, his voice cold. How long before they re-establish control? Minutes. Maybe less. Then we don't have minutes. Kane's mind was a storm of calculated chaos. Fall back to the exfil point. Negative. Kyra's voice crackled through. We're boxed in. Drones on all sides. We move, we're dead. Situation report. South corridor compromised. Talon's voice was tight. 2 squadrons moving in. North corridor's worse, Kyra added. They're funneling us. Kane's lips pressed into a thin line. They're not just surrounding us. His voice was dangerously calm. They're hurting us. Silence echoed across the comms. They want us alive, Kane murmured, realization dawning. They're not killing us because they want to learn, Zorak whispered. They want to study us. Kane's tone was ice. They're not just adapting to our tactics. A chill ran down his spine. They're adapting to us. Orders? Talon's voice was steady, but Kane could hear the undertone, a predator waiting for the signal to strike. Kane's mind raced. New plan. His eyes darkened with resolve. We take the fight to them. Kane! Zorak's hesitation was uncharacteristic. That's suicide. No. Kane's voice was steel. That's victory. A beat of silence. We don't get out of this by running. His voice was sharp, unwavering. We get out by making sure they don't. Exfil is compromised, Kyra murmured, her voice tight. We've got one shot at this. Then we make it count. Kane's tone was absolute. Talon, Kyra, you cover the corridor. Zorak, prep the secondary payload. What about you? Kyra's voice was barely a whisper. I'm going to finish what we started. A heavy silence filled the air. Kane! Talon's voice was quiet, but there was no doubt. You're not coming back, are you? Not part of the plan. Kane murmured, his expression unreadable. You always said. Kyra's voice wavered. No heroes. Kane's smile was grim. But sometimes. A pause. You have to become the nightmare they fear. Kane. Zorak's voice was strained. If you detonate the secondary core from inside, you'll. I know. Kane interrupted, his tone final. Just make sure the payload gets delivered. Understood. Seal the corridors? Kane commanded, his voice dropping to a lethal calm. Buy me 5 minutes. Copy. Kyra. Kane's voice softened. You get them out. I don't leave people behind, she murmured. You will this time. Silence. That's an order. A sharp intake of breath. Understood. Good. Kane's eyes locked onto the neural core ahead, the pulsing mass of the swarm's collective consciousness. Let's give them something they'll never forget. Kane moved like a shadow, his steps silent as death. The nexus loomed before him, its tendrils of neural energy pulsating with sickening life. The swarm was rebuilding itself, adapting to Widowmaker's corruption. Almost there. Zorak's voice whispered through the calm. Secondary payload primed. Kane's eyes narrowed. Activate on my mark. The drones sensed him now, a ripple of awareness echoing through the hive. They surged forward, a tide of claws and steel. I see you, Kane murmured, a predatory gleam in his eyes. But you don't see me. He moved with lethal precision, plasma daggers slicing through swarm drones with cold efficiency. He was a ghost, a whisper in the chaos, a nightmare given form. Kane, you've got 20 seconds. Zorak's voice was tight. Plenty of time. Kane's movements were a blur, a symphony of destruction. He danced between the drones, blades carving through metal and flesh alike. The swarm adapted, but Kane was always one step ahead. 10 seconds. Almost there. Kane's breath was steady, his mind laser-focused. The core was within reach. 5 seconds. Kane's hand reached for the neural interface. Mark. Kane's mind flooded with raw data, the hive's consciousness crashing into him like a tidal wave. The swarm's thoughts, its hunger, its rage, all of it. Deploying payload. Zorak's voice was distant. Kane's mind burned, but he didn't let go. You want to understand us? Kane's voice echoed through the neural link, his consciousness bleeding into the hive. Then let me show you what fear really looks like. The payload triggered, a cascade of corrupted data flooding the Nexus. Kane poured his memories into the hive. Every battle, every loss, every moment of chaos that humanity had endured and overcome. You adapt to logic. Kane's voice was a whisper, echoing through the swarm's mind. But you can't adapt to madness. The hive screamed, the neural network fracturing under the weight of human chaos. Kane! Kyra's voice was distant, barely breaking through the static. Get out of there! Kane's grip on the interface tightened, his mind tethered to the core. Not happening. We can still. No. His voice was final. This ends now. Kane, please! Tell them. His voice softened, his mind slipping deeper into the neural abyss. Tell them we never stopped fighting. A beat. And we never will. The Nexus collapsed. Core detonation confirmed. Zorak's voice echoed, but it was hollow. Kyra's eyes were locked on the ruins of the Nexus, her hands trembling. Kane! Silence. We have to move. Talon's voice was quiet, but firm. The swarm's collapsing. Kyra's gaze lingered for a moment longer. Goodbye, Maddox, she whispered, her voice barely audible. As the team retreated, the remnants of the Nexus crumbled behind them, taking with it the last echoes of Maddox Kane. But the galaxy would never forget. Because Kane didn't just kill the swarm. He left them with something far worse. A memory. A nightmare. A lesson. Fear is forever.